Are you talking in terms of who's the producer of this service? Is it Etisalat you're talking about?
Yeah, Itisalat is Bureau Veritas, for example, my company, in order to improve their what we call outcome, like a response to the service to the client. They have given a 24 hours availability of internet package and calls that we can do, right? So Itisalat come up with a plan and they give this plan with this mobile, which we got it from Itisalat initially.
Oh, this is, we need to look at it in different way here. If you look at it, BlackBerry as a separate component, you will see BlackBerry as a provider to Etisalat. So here, Etisalat is actually the consumer of the product that is being produced by BlackBerry, which is the phone itself, the hardware.
Right.
But when Etisalat is trying to target its customers, right,
Right.
it has a lot of stakeholders that we saw. It
Right.
has analyzed that one of the stakeholders or customers are very keen to use the BlackBerry version of the phones. There are particular reasons for it. There are particular uh, ways to do it because they're more official and they have their own servers. The conversations that you do are on a private server that you can have. So for that reason, still people are continuing to use BlackBerry.
Right.
Now, customer is the end user, which is you. We cannot take, we can consider your company, Bureau Veritas, as the consumer now. And Etisalat is going to be the provider. This is how we saw the consumer can become a provider by leveraging other consumes or that it has consumed. So now Etisalat is actually the provider for you so that you are consuming the service as a package. If you have
Right.
any problem with the BlackBerry, it all depends on the terms and conditions that you have with Etisalat. They can tell you, you contact with Etisalat, we will resolve it for you, or they may ask you to contact directly the BlackBerry support for any issues as well.
All right. But in this, considering this scenario, how Etisalat will be a consumer of the product, because they will just maybe buy from BlackBerry and sell to their customer like Bureau Veritas or end consumers. Sorry, huh?
No, if you try to understand, Etisalat might have a packaged with the BlackBerry, right? They have
Right.
their own terms and conditions.
Right.
BlackBerry wants to sell the hardware directly to customers, but they might have failed to target a particular customer group. Etisalat has got a big chain and a big database of customers. BlackBerry may not have that, but it is a strategy from the BlackBerry to understand to sell the products in a different channel. So this is how you adapt to new environmental conditions, right? There is a big competition from Samsung and Apple, where the BlackBerry is not able to actually compete and come out with better products or target and achieve direct selling. When you cannot do a direct selling like Samsung and iPhone, you need to have another strategy to become a co-creator or you become a partner with Etisalat. You partner with Etisalat, you're still selling your product, but then definitely there is terms and conditions to it. You may not be able to sell it at the same price, or there will be a give and take. Maybe BlackBerry is taking a service from Etisalat and Etisalat in turn gives something else to them.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
so let's move on. As I told you, the core, the central of ITL4 is service value system. So it is all about seeing value to the consumer and to the provider as well. That being said, how do I ensure value? It's all about how you give your products and services to the customers. which describes how all the components and activities of the organization work together as a system to enable this value creation. So soon we will be, later today, we will be seeing this service value system. So I will just show you here in a brief. We saw about this opportunity and demand. We understand what are the opportunity that an organization has. Example, we can take about the Zoom video conference that we're talking about. Not many people were actually using this service until this COVID-19 had come. There was an environmental factor. We will see that a little later. What are the various factors that affect this whole value system itself from an outside, and they still don't have any control over it. It can be a positive or a negative. For Zoom, the COVID was actually a very negative one. It helped the organization to come up and Zoom ramp up their services in a very uh, big way. They were trying to compete with Microsoft, they were trying to compete with Facebook, and they were trying to compete with Google as well, and WebEx and other organizations. They emerged really well, and their share markets really went up. So they tried to use this opportunity. They already had a video conferencing platform. They saw this opportunity. They tried to enhance, optimize what we saw there. They didn't start anything from scratch. We saw this yesterday. We don't have to start anything from scratch. They had a platform, they had all the services in place. They tried to enhance the service. And this dotted lines that you see is the service value chain. It is a path that you take to provide value to the customer. While you're taking this path, there are certain factors that we need to consider in a whole way. The 7 guiding principles that we saw yesterday, the governance which is around it. When we talk about governance, it is not just about, you know, telling somebody what to do. It is the direction from the organization. It's a recommendation for the management to tell them on which way to go about. And then we have the 34 practices, the management practices that we will soon see later in the course. And this is again a loop again, which is talking about continual improvement. We have seen this in V3, and this is part of V4 as well. We need to continuously take feedback into consideration and then improve each and every process that we do. We will have different organizations, different departments involved in the service value chain till the end product, which is the actual value that we deliver to the customer.
Thomas, I've got one question here.
Yeah.
Now, now we yesterday, in fact, we were told by you that existing process has got a lot of importance. We have to look into what the existing service delivery processes, right?
That is correct, yes.
Now, a question come, a new organization designing, engineering their service deliveries. Will it also fall under the scope of ITIL V4 or it is excluded then? Did you got my question?
No, can you repeat it again? Sorry.
Yesterday, you told us that existing services we need to focus upon somewhere in the principle as a part of principle. You know, we have to start.
That's right.
Now, a new organization starting from scratch, of course, they will design and engineer their service delivery process. So, it is under the scope of ITIL V4 also the new services.
Yes, if you're thinking of a company which is, just starting, there's absolutely nothing. But always an organization has to fall back on a framework or a skeleton. See, it is very difficult for an organization to start without any structure, right? I need to depend on something. Okay, I have an HR team, I have a finance team, I have a higher management. I start with small teams, but then what are they supposed to do? What is my culture? What is my strategy? What is my business vision? The mission of the organization, All this has to be understood, right? You start off with something. So you cannot have a very random way of coming out with an organization setup. This is how ITIL also tells you. You always need to consider organization and people, which is very important. We will soon, one of the dimensions that we are going to see is that organizations and people. In organizations, you will see very clearly what is the culture that I need to have? What is the kind of organized structure that I need to have? So you will define all this, right? So what is a hierarchical level? What is a functional org structure that you want? Or is it a matrix kind of an org structure that you want? You will have to brainstorm all this, and then you will start to kind of set up your company. How will you do that without having a framework? There or somebody telling you, okay, these are the minimal things that you need. It could be a simple service desk that is might be required for the service that you're probably providing. Imagine you're trying to come out with a new car hire setup where you have a fleet of cars and you have drivers to do run this. You have a higher management who recruits the drivers and to do this. But at the same time, you might need to have a service desk where people will call and try to hire cars or book the cars as well. So have you thought about that? How is all the structure going to work? Who is going to report to whom? Is a clear roles and responsibilities defined? Your job description itself becomes a very important document here. So though you're going to start from scratch, you need to have certain basic fundamental things. And that is how many frameworks can help you with. If you go to ISO 20000, again, it is similarly talking about whether the organization actually has a strategy or a mission and vision. And are you doing the activities in line with it? That is very important. If you say that your mission is actually to support, ICT infrastructure to the citizens of UAE or a particular emirate, are you trying to keep your scope only to that? If you say you're going to target only a particular customers, then your job and your activities has to be limited to that. You cannot do something totally outside. Yeah.
So culture is one could be considered existing, already existing. Mind, psychology, culture, or the process. It doesn't matter how simple the process is, how complex the process is, right?
Yes. Culture is a very important thing, but the most important thing is your strategy, right? Where you all start off from.
Right.
What is the objective of this organization? What is the vision of the organization? What is the mission of the organization? You have the goals that you want to achieve, right?
Right.
The goals are going to be directly mapped to the vision and mission of the organization.
Right.
Without this, I think you really cannot start from anywhere.
Right.
Okay. Today's chapter is to start off with the 4 dimensions of service management, which is very important to do. The 4 dimensions of service management are the organizations and people, information and technology, partners and suppliers, and the value streams and processes. And this is the external forces that will be acting upon these 4 dimensions. And as I mentioned to you, these factors have no control. You cannot really control them.
Sorry, I can't see your slides.
Okay. Are you able to see now?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay. So what are these dimensions are? The objective of an organization is to create value. That is what we saw in the service value system for the stakeholders. And this is achieved through the provisioning or providing the services, the products, or the outcomes of your service. To achieve the desired outcomes and work as effectively as possible, organizations should consider all aspects of the behavior. So you need to consider all these four together, be it your organization and people, or its information and technology, the partners and suppliers, and your value stream and processes. So I'll just show you a quick image here to depict this. So definitely from the exam perspective, you need to remember these four dimensions as well and have a clear understanding about it. In terms of organization and people, these are overlapping, and think about as each as an aspect or an entity which will be coordinating with the others. What are the organization structure? As we discussed, it should be the roles and responsibilities of the people, or it could be the org structure, the culture of the organization, staffing, competency. And it is all about understanding the people, what skills we need and what skills we have. Just consider if you follow football, you might have seen that the team which is actually losing many a times, it is the manager which actually who gets fired. It's not the players. Players might be moved from one team to other, but it's the manager who gets fired. Yes, it's easy to fire one person rather than firing about 20 people. But the concept is getting a new manager into the team actually helps the team, or he could see the team in a different way. You are using the same people, the same skills, but you're trying to make a magic with the skills that they have. You realize their potential. You understand that this person's strength is probably to play in the forward, or give him new tactics, make him understand that he or she can actually work better by being a partner and not trying to uh, you be selfish or some way or the other. You're trying to bring that collaboration and cooperation between the team members. All this actually enhances that team to probably work differently. So when we look at this organization and people, information and technology, the value streams and processes and partners and suppliers, we need to look at them holistically. Tausif, as you said, when you're trying to start off a new organization or you want to come up with a new service, you will look at this big picture all the time and say, are I having a good balance of all this? Most of the time when some new services that comes out, they always focus on the information and technology. For example, you want to come out with a new application or a new ERP system to be rolled out. All they do is they probably get a consultant from outside, purchase the product, try to get it into the production system quickly as possible, and then get it rolled out without probably realizing how this probably could impact the people or the organization. Maybe the service desk is not really trained enough to handle the tickets which are related to the product, or the system teams doesn't have the knowledge, or there is no sufficient admin guides or user guides to handle any kind of troubleshooting that might be required. Partners and suppliers are probably the vendor that you are engaged with. do you probably you think about a service contract with the company? If there is a product upgrade, who is responsible for it? Will the company be able to do it? Or is it the partner that they have they signed with? Are they going to do that? Are you put it into your, in your agreement that you need to have a health check completed every 6 months on the product itself? So understanding the partner's role and the supplier's role is also important. Once you have this technology that you have created a lot of processes on how this needs to work, how they need to raise a request for change, how a value has to be realized through this. Have you really defined a workflow for all this? So many people or organizations actually fail to look at all the aspects, all the dimensions that are required for Itil service management, and they just concentrate on the technology aspect. And that is why you really don't see the complete potential of the service. And because of this pandemic situation, many people came out with many solutions recently to adapt to the new conditions. And again, their primary focus was getting the technology. They just wanted people to work from home. Somehow they wanted a new VPN connection so that they can connect to the network, or some kind of video conferencing platforms so that they can have a meeting online. But after rolling out in the production, they kind of realized that the other dimensions were not good enough. Maybe they didn't do a proper service agreement signed with the partners or suppliers, or there was no proper process defined on how to avail the service, or the people of the organization itself may not have the right skills to adapt to the new technology. Maybe they didn't think about the training that was required for the service desk or the other teams. So when it comes to a new service or even a new platform that you want to launch, just have these four things in your mind and ask this question: when am I doing this? Am I having a good balance of all this? Then, if you're not making justice to even to one section of it, definitely you need to revisit and make sure that you address all the questions based on this. So we are going to dive deep into each dimension that is required. And then we will see how the external factors impact on this. So just to touch upon the external factors, we need to consider this PESTEL model. Have you heard of this PESTEL model? PESTEL. The P stands for political,
Yes.
E is for economic, S for social,
T for technology.
technology, yes, E for environment.
Environment. L for legal.
Very correct. So these are your external factors that we are actually talking about, which will have a direct impact on these four dimensions. And definitely you don't have much of a control on it. You can consider this pandemic situation itself as a social and environmental effect that it had on a particular service. You had a service which was really going smooth, but then this environmental effect changed the whole idea on how you need to uh, produce the service. Many people had to adapt to new ways of doing their business. Some people had to continue with education, but the education system itself changed to remote learning that we see now. What was a very straightforward going from home to schools and universities, now the whole thing changed. You're still able to deliver the value, which is education to the students, but then the way you're doing it has changed. Many people have to, or organizations have to get adapted. That's where your agility of the organization comes into picture. Many organizations do not have that agility. They are still hesitant to adapt to new technologies. It could be a political environmental factor as well. If you are outside UAE and Gulf countries, you will definitely see there's so much of unrest that happens. There is, a section of the city itself might have been locked down for different political reasons. And when they try to have the service continuity enabled, they need to think about all this. When you do an outsource to a country like India or any other Asian countries, one of the factors to be considered is the political situation, because there is a dynamic changes that keeps happening in those areas. So you need to be extremely cautious about it. Understand the risk that you're dealing with when you're trying to handle situations or when you're trying to outsource an activity to such a country. And as I mentioned, this external factors you will not be able to control, and time to time it will be changing, and you can even think of very new ones as well.
Excuse me, sir. Can you please let us know when you're changing the slides? Because I'm not sure it gets updated.
Yeah, I just changed the slide from that picture to the PDF here.
I can't see the video.
Just changed it now.
It's fine.
Can you see? Yeah. So in the picture, we saw about the 4 dimensions, which are the organization and people, information and technology. So information and technology, don't take it as IT. It is information, which is talking about knowledge. You can consider that as your inventory system or the knowledge base itself. If you have from a service desk, you will know the importance of having a knowledge base for yourself and for the team. Or you know the issues that are coming there, you document those issues, you understand the solution to the issues, so that if the same solution or problem occurs, the other service desk agent actually refers back to the same ticket, resolves it in a very quick manner, and then you see the satisfaction of the customer because they want the issue to be resolved as soon as possible. Or think about the user guides and the admin guides, which are necessary for each and every product. Think about the training and the training material that you have to make sure all your agents or your employees to be aware of the policies and processes. So these are the information that we're talking about. Technology, as you know, the technology used to enable those services. And we saw about partners and suppliers, value stream, and the process. So we'll quickly go through this. Yep.
Information and technology is to be treated as information separate and technology separate, right?
That is correct, yes.
Not IT.
It's not IT, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got one question, though you will be explaining us later in detail.
Sure.
How this model, this 4-dimension correlate to SDS? What is the relation between these two?
Yeah, in this picture, you can actually see this. It all starts with the core value, right? You're looking at value, how you want to deliver value to your customers. And how do you want to achieve the value that you want to give is through your product and services. And if you look at these 4 dimensions, they're not in silo. They are overlapping with each other. And some way or the other, they will interact. Try to consider a situation here. You have a wonderful product that you have created and a wonderful service. But if a customer is not able to realize the value of it, maybe because of the people that you're working with, they try to call your service desk and they're not in a position to answer or resolve the issues for you effectively, do you think people will still continue to use the service? How, we have seen this with many communications department services like Etisalat or Do. People switch from one network to the other, and this is one of the reasons. The price could probably the same. Sorry, uh, the call rate or the data usage rate, the how they charge will exactly be the same. But why do you think people move from one service to the other? They see that one of the component that you see here could be probably much better. Many people, what I've seen is the contact center that they deal with and the way the organization actually thinks about it. Some organization will have an automated machine, the robots trying to answer your calls and then trying to resolve the issue for you. People may not be really happy about it, though the service can be really extremely good. Just for that factor, they will try to move away to another service. Or there could be another factor where an organization is actually better than the other in terms of technology itself. Maybe now people are very used to mobile applications. You have a normal, a taxi service that is there. But if you look at Uber, you just pick up a phone with click of buttons, you have your driver waiting at the doorstep for you. So you can provide the same service, same thing, but when you acknowledge all these four dimensions in the right way, when you have a good balance of all those, that is when the actual value will be realized. Do we get the big picture from these four dimensions?
No, my query is that we have got the four dimensions, starting with organization and people, information technology, suppliers, supply,
Partners and suppliers, yeah?
value stream, and the supplier, and last is the one more, which is basically
Processes.
the partners and suppliers. Okay. So my question is that how, what I could understand, yesterday we have discussed SVS, service value model.
Mhm.
Now, when we put this model separate, how they are correlated, they are related. For example, what I could understand is from somewhere in the material I have gone through, it means that this organization people is derived from SVS. These dimensions are derived from SVS, uh, or we need to apply these dimensions to the service value model,
Yes, we
right?
need to apply this as to the service model,
Yeah,
to
this
the
is
service value system.
service value system, right?
Yes,
That's the only relation between these two.
correct. You
Fine.
start off with this, with the four dimensions, and
Yes.
then you understand later in the service value system, you'll understand how the opportunity or the demand is kind of analyzed. You will go through a set of processes, and then you will achieve the value out of it, how you reach the value chain.
Right. So without this, so this is the mechanism to achieve the objective of SBS.
You can say the whole service management in total. Yes.
Right. Fine. Thank you.
Yeah. So as we
Uh,
said,
Sorry.
all these,
One more
yeah,
point.
go ahead.
Second point, these four dimensions represent perspective which are relevant to the whole service value system, including the entirety of the service value chain and all ITIL practices. So could you please re-explain this statement? And the last part probably, including the entirety of service value chain and all ITIL practices. Second point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll quickly show you an image here, then you understand from that.
Perspective and then relevant to the whole service value system, including the entirety of service value chain and all ITL practices.
I'll just show you an image.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you see this image on the screen?
Yes, I can see the image
Yeah,
on
this is the service value system that we are talking about.
the.
And these four dimensions actually apply on this complete entirety of value system.
Right.
Okay, you need to apply it from the opportunity that you see till the actual value that is realized.
Right.
But to this value system, there are other things that are factors that are there, which we will see in the later stages.
Right. Right, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. We always have to look at it as in a holistic way. Don't look at it as each dimensions in a separate manner. So next time when you walk into a room where they're probably discussing about a new service to be offered or a new technology that will be uh, changing in your organization for the benefit of the customers or for your employees, this picture should actually come into your mind. There will be definitely the consultants who will be sitting there trying to or tell you that how well the technology will work, but think about the other important aspects. And this is main reason, as I mentioned, why the actual value is not realized or taken out of the service, because they fail to understand there are other components which are involved. They buy a product with a proper warranty and proper service agreement, then they realize that they didn't actually concentrate on the partners and suppliers component. So think about all this. And as you can see, the external factors which are actually on this four dimensions, they will have a direct impact at different perspectives. Together, these four dimensions are critical for the effective and efficient facilitation of value for customers. That is what we are seeing. And these four dimensions represent perspectives which were relevant to the whole service value system that we saw, and including the entirety of the service value chain that we saw from the opportunity or demand till how you realize the value in all Itil practices. And these four dimensions are definitely are influenced by the external factors, the pestle model that we saw. Now let's look into each dimension in clear. So these are the contents coming from the textbook itself, from the Itil. So let's try to understand this. Yes, we acknowledge it for the fact that the organizations are complex in nature. They have different visions, different strategies. Maybe the processes are very simple, but then when they think about the vision and mission of the organization, they could be really complex, where they want to really go from there. It is important to ensure that the way an organization is structured and managed, and the roles and responsibilities, the systems and of authority and communication is well defined. Exactly, this is again discussed what about a few minutes back, that once you have this people factor in your organization, which is the most critical and important, many organizations forget about it and they think only on the IT perspective. From the people perspective, you need to know whether my team really knows their responsibilities, what is their role, and do they realize what is the organization vision is. There was a very important incident that happened during the time of John F. Kennedy when he visited NASA. There was a janitor who was cleaning, and then the president went and spoke to him, asked him, What is your role? What are you doing here? He said that he's actually helping the people who are working on moon. The president was taken by a surprise. But then, if you actually look at it, everybody has a role to play in the value what the organization is trying to achieve. So you could be just a small part of the service desk, but then if you try to see what the organization really want to achieve or give a value to the customer, if they understand that, they will all work together. There will be a proper collaboration, and there will be a transparency between teams. Or they will be just like these, in a nutshell, they will not try to open up themselves, and they will just do their job and leave. So this kind of culture where even from the low level to the higher management, if they're aware about their roles and responsibilities, if they're aware about the organization objectives and vision, if they're very clear about it, the organization works and functions in a much effective manner. And it is vital for the leaders of the organization be a champion or advocate of values to motivate people to work in a desirable way. So the higher management takes a big initiative in this, and they are more responsible to ensure all the levels below them, their communication happens to are cascaded to make them aware of all their responsibilities. Also, it is a way in which organization carries out its work and creates a shared value and attitude. Most of the time, if you look at it, when there is a success, it is always celebrated by the top management. They don't really share it with the people below them. They host a party, all only the elite line managers or the top management is being invited. There should be a cultural change. Somewhere the low level management or the low level teams have played a critical role as well. Maybe it is a simple procurement team which actually analyzed the terms and conditions of the contract. There was a legal team. They played a very critical role to get all their terms from the organization perspective into it. That's how the deal was closed. That's how the project was completed. Everybody had some part to play, but is the organization going to give credit to all these members? So you need to think from that perspective. And then adopting to the Itil guiding principles can be a good starting point. As you asked me, can they do that if they're starting from scratch? Yes, it's going to be a good starting point for establishing a healthy organization culture. So these are the four important dimensions within the organization and people. The service covers the roles and responsibilities. There's a formal organization structure. It could be, the functional structure or matrix or what suits your strategy. You can come up with your own organization structure that works well for you. The most important thing is the culture of the organization, the kind of business etiquettes that you have, how much of importance that you would give to run a business in a fair way, and ensuring you have the required staffing and competencies. You make sure that you hire the right talent, the right skilled people to complete your activities. So that way you will make sure, and it makes it easy for the organization to deliver what they want in a very easy manner. You kind of have a software developer working in a systems team. Maybe he's really not good in that. He can probably complete the task, but in a not an effective and efficient manner. Place them in the right teams, understand the core skills, and then work accordingly. So all these that we saw are essential elements for creating and delivering and improving the services that you have. Again, the emphasis is on the people. This is a factor which, again, many people forget when trying to have a new service offered or coming out with enhancing the new service, existing service also. So the key focus areas with respect to people should be the skills and competencies, management and leadership styles. The different kind of leadership styles would be, some could be a dictatorship. That could work, in different ways. But if you're a people person where you go and understand what the actual employees want, if you work with them, communicate and collaborate with them, and then you will be able to actually realize the skills that they have, and use it for your own business. So a proper level of collaboration and coordination should be there. And as I mentioned yesterday as well, if you have different teams, they cannot work in silos. There should be a proper workflow defined, how these teams interact. Is there a proper feedback at each level that is taken so that they can improve their internal services as well? So they will have interfaces between different departments, and that transition has to be very smooth. Every person in the organization should have a clear understanding of their contribution towards creating that greater value for the organization. How are they going to uh, impact, what kind of impact they will have with the customers? Imagine again, a very rude service desk doesn't even care about the customers answering the call and trying to troubleshoot. Maybe it did resolve the issue for them, but if you're not polite enough, because you are the front end of the organization, you're the face of the organization, when you try to deliver a service not an acceptable manner, definitely you are not contributing to creating that value for the organization. It becomes very important that you train your employees the soft skills that are required and analyze whether they're doing it rightly. So moving on to the next dimension, which is information and technology. As I told you about, it is a knowledge necessary for the management of services. If you look at information or knowledge, it's usually the output that is created at each and every uh, interface or organization or a department. Try to look at it as a software development company. After they have developed the software or the application, the product itself has got a lot of documents into it. It could be the help. If you press F1, you get the help, which is within the application. And then you have the developer's guide. You might have an API guide. You might have an admin guide for the application. And at the end, you might have the user guide as well. So it's the output of most of the services or the internal services or the departments itself. But it becomes a very keen and important element in terms of the 4 dimensions of service management. Also, it incorporates the relationship between different components of service value system that we actually saw there, and such as the inputs and outputs of an activity or practice. In the service value system, we saw about the 34 practice areas. So each and every area practice will have inputs or outputs which are based on the knowledge. Some knowledge are explicit, which are not documented in the employee's head. They know how to configure a system. They know how to actually work and troubleshoot. Maybe these are not really documented anywhere. And when the employee leaves the organization with that kind of knowledge, it's a huge loss for the organization because you have not really captured and documented it, or may not a proper handover or transition has happened from the employee who's leaving. So this aspect becomes very important. You need to concentrate on these technologies supporting the service management. And from the exam point of view, there are certain questions asked on this as well. So the technologies supporting the service management include workflow management, knowledge base that we saw, inventory systems. It could be your asset inventory, your document inventory, communication systems, which can be your email, chats, and different analytical systems. It can analyze your data, it can analyze your logs. At the end, these analyticals help organizations and the management to take better informed decision. What do they actually give out? The reports, the dashboard that the management wants to see. If they see that they're reaching the good capacity on their server management, maybe it is time to actually invest on buying a new rack in the data center. If they see there is a lot of calls and emailed tickets that are raised for password reset, then maybe it is a time to invest in password management tools, which automatically enables user to reset their passwords. So all these analytical tools help organization and management to take better informed decisions. They know where to invest. Yesterday, as we saw, you should be really careful with the budget that you have, and you need to invest in the right areas. Continuing with the information and technology, the information created, managed, and used in the course of service provisioning and consumption should be taken into account. While you're actually creating and managing, you will definitely have different kinds of inputs and outputs. Maybe the input could be a simple document that you start off with. At the end, the output should be a report. Maybe when you're trying to do your problem management, your service ticket that you started off with could be a good input. But then when you resolved it, the actual solution for the problem is documented and it is then stored in the knowledge base. You need to understand if that could be an input for the change management itself. Maybe there is an upgrade of the system that is required. So these informations become an input and output for the other services or practices. The technologies that support and enable the service are your IT architecture, applications, databases, communication systems, and integration systems. It is very important that you have an integration between the systems that you have. Earlier, if you look at all the vendors who were selling the products, they were having systems which would do only that particular part. Some were selling products only for chat. Some were doing a product just for video conferencing. Some were selling a product just for sharing your screens for troubleshooting. But if you look at it now, things are getting evolved. All these systems talk to each other, or they are actually packaged together. Now, when you try to purchase any system, you definitely ask this question: will it get integrated to my email system? I want an alert to be generated from my email system. Or is there an API, application programming interface, available so that it can talk to the other systems? How can I leverage the benefits that comes from the other systems? So integration of systems are very important. And at the same time, you need to say that they're all working together in an effective manner. The specified information technology depends on the nature of services being provided. And for many services, information management is primary means of enabling customer value. Think of a manual that comes out with your mobile phones. So it is a primary mean of enabling customer value, because most of the time they will unbox a new iPhone or a Samsung phone. They would try to go through that manual, most of them. They try to see what are the features that are available. If it should be a smartwatch, the manuals that come along with it. All this information management becomes a very key to enable customer value. So again, when you go into enabling a new service, when it comes to information, these are the things that you need to ask when you're in that room. What information is managed by this service? What supporting information knowledge are needed to deliver and manage these services? Who will the information and knowledge assets be protected, managed, archived, and disposed of? In the last point, if you see that there is a clear life cycle of document management or knowledge base management. You cannot have the information that was created about 3 to 4 years back, which will be relevant now because your IT or the platform itself is changed. So you need to have an archive process in place. Those information that are not relevant over a period of time, which you will realize that these documents are no longer required, or maybe they need to be updated. So the older version of these information will actually be archived and disposed. So there might be a timeline for certain documents as well, which after a certain point, they cannot be used or it will not be of any use to anybody. So just to other points, how information is exchanged between the services and service components. That also we need to understand how there is a proper workflow between different service components and different teams that are involved in this. And it is also an important question to ask if there's any regulations that mandate service or knowledge-based management. Because if you're going for certain audits, they will definitely say that certain documents have to be maintained for 7 years, 8 years. So are you ready for such kind of compliance requirements? Do you have the technology and necessary aspects to support these compliance requirement as well? So whenever there is a legal or a law case, you can always fall back on those archived information which you have stored for years to support your legal. So these are the questions when it comes to technology you need to be asking yourself. Is the technology compatible with the current architecture of the organization and its customer? So you already have a IT architecture established, but when you try to bring in this new technology, is it still compatible? Or is it disrupting your existing architecture itself? And the customers, because of bringing in this new technology, is it going to have any kind of impact on the customer? You need to think about those questions, especially for an example, if you're trying to have a payment gateway in your organization, whether people can use MasterCard or Visa to make their transactions, which you never thought of. Now you need to be compliant to the PCI DSS, which brings up a big responsibility on how you need to handle your data, or your current infrastructure or architecture may not be compatible to it, or you cannot get compliant to that. So if you cannot really accommodate and have a compatibility, it is better to drop off the service. And I need to ask this question of emerging technologies likely to disrupt the service of the organization itself. So you're bringing a new service, but then that could be a big disaster for the organization. And as we mentioned, are you ready to comply with any kind of regulations? Same example would be your payment card industry, security, data security, PCI DSS. So you might have to be compliant to that regulations. You might have to get certified if in case you're looking at the payment gateway. Is the technology that will continue to be viable in a foreseeable future? It should not be a short-lived technology over a period of times, at least 5 years, are you seeing that this technology will still continue to be used? Or you purchase a product for today, and then within 6 to 8 months, you see that there's a better technology to address the same issue. And then you need to ask this question of whether it aligns to your strategy, to the service provider, which is you, or the consumers. It all boils down to that. You have a strategy in place, you have a defined customers, you know who you need to address to, but is it still aligned to it? Most of the organizations actually, after eventual time, they deviate from their strategy itself without realizing that the value or that they want to achieve will be of no use, or they're really addressing a different kind of customers or stakeholders. With respect to technology for use of planning and designing your services, you need to ask these questions again. Does the organization have the right skills across its staff and suppliers? This is again related to the people and organization. So it's not the people of your organization. Maybe you need to think about the suppliers or the vendor. In case you have a product, say from Microsoft, and Microsoft has its own support team, how confident are you that you will get your issues resolved when you're contacting the support team? Do you think that they will be able to do a fair job and resolve your issues in a timely manner? What is their reputation outside in the market? So you need to analyze these aspects as well. Does the technology have sufficient automation capabilities, which is now a big boom in the market about automating things, trying to remove the human error? Will the technology actually support it? Does it can provide additional capabilities that can be leveraged to the products and services that you already have? And the most important question is, which really that happens in your organization, is trying to bring in a new technology can introduce new risk to the organization. So whenever you try to come out with a new service, doing a risk assessment on how it can have impact on the people, on the process, and the technology is a very important thing. So do your risk analysis there, and then you need to take the right approval from your management to go ahead with the other steps. The culture of the organization and the nature of the business will actually affect the technologies that you choose. For example, take Facebook. They were more into social media where you're leveraging these options to connect to different people. This environmental factor of pandemic situation, Facebook saw this option of coming out with video conferencing, where they're now trying to compete with the Citrix WebEx or other video conferencing like Zoom or Microsoft Teams as well. So the culture of the organization and the nature of the business you do, they already had this messenger to get connected on video calls and phone calls as well. But they're trying to leverage it to a different way so that it can address this remote working and remote learning as well. So, but it was all, this is how the organization culture actually works and the nature of the business you do. You're almost there in that, and you didn't start off from the scratch. You just developed and optimized what you had to take it to the next level. This is a very important aspect that you need to remember. And also, it's a very important from the exam perspective as well. We cannot ignore the fact about not discussing the cloud computing, because most of the organizations and businesses are moving to the cloud. The reason is the risks are very low. You're trying to transfer most of the risk to the cloud service providers. You have a very minimal things to take care of. The most important thing is, are you confident enough to give the data in the cloud, keep the data there? Are they going to have proper security around it to ensure that you only people who are required to access the data can actually see it? So cloud computing, as you're aware, there are different cloud computing service providers, be it your Microsoft Azure, Google, and then you have from Amazon Web Services, and there are other small players as well. It's a model of enabling an on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. What it means here is it is a shared environment. You can have a big rack, you can have multiple servers in it, but it will be a shared environment in terms of your network, in terms of your storage, in terms of your CPU, in terms of your memory. So it is very easy to configure. What are the characteristics of cloud computing? Is on-demand availability. It is just like pay as you use. You take a small server which suffices only that particular application or the need of the organization. If you want to enhance it, you just pay a little more and then you try to increase the memory or storage that you want. So based on the need, on the demand, the availability of services there. Network access is often your internet access or the network it shares, how easily you can get connected to them. Resource pooling is about a shared or among the multiple organizations. It is a same rack probably used by different organizations. Yes, definitely there will be a firewall to make sure that only those organizations that they have access to the resource will be seeing those details only. And most important thing is the rapid elasticity, which means you're able to often automatically upgrade to the next level. Based on your capacity and availability, you just have to move and extend maybe your storage or increase the memory. You see there is a drop in your performance. You analyze that probably memory should be your issue. You increase it. Your storage could be expanded immediately. And definitely, it is often from the services consumer's perspective. I'm seeing the value, whatever I perceive, and I get it, and it can be measured. And that is the good part about cloud computing here.
I have one question. Can
Yeah,
you?
Tavsif.
Uh, I was just trying to understand. See, I'm a first timer for this type of concept. So, yesterday I was going through this definition: a model for enabling on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources that can be rapidly provided with minimal management effort or provider interaction. The later part I got it was the first, a model for enabling on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing sources. Can you please re-explain this part? Enabling on-demand network access. So it's only a network access to the network. That's it.
What it really means is if you have worked with the VMware or virtualization environment, you also have a virtual desktop infrastructure, which is provided by, sorry, by Citrix or any other products as well. Think about infrastructure as a service. You want a server, which is Windows 2019 server, and you specify my storage should be 1 TB, your memory should be of 16 GB or whatever, and this is your specification. How are you going to access this resource? It is a simple network access that will enable it for you. Over the network, internet, like Salesforce and other cloud platforms, you can just connect your resource that you want access to, and then it will enable, or you have this availability of cloud computing. It is so simple now that you can leverage or often have a infrastructure as a service, which is your servers, a platform as a service, or a software as a service. Consider your Microsoft 365. Now you really don't purchase a product. You just pay for the license. You're not downloading anything on your computer. You just have to have access to it through your license. And all this data, everything is actually stored on the cloud. What does that enables you to access this is just your network access, which is your internet. You're connected on an internet, you have leveraged this product or service that is provided by Microsoft. Even your Office products can be used from there. But what is that you're paying for? You're not going to pay for the infrastructure. You're not paying for the storage. It is just for the usage of the software only, which is the software as a platform, as a service.
So basically, this is IaaS, infrastructure as a service, right?
It could be infrastructure as a service. It could be software as a service. It could be platform as a service.
So this means that instead of buying some infrastructure, we are sourcing this infrastructure service or any software service, right?
Correct. Example, you can think of your Gmail as well. You want to think as it as a software as a service. It is enabling for your email communication. You don't have a server for yourself. If you look at it, you have a big data center, you have a server inside, you have a Microsoft Exchange product installed. You have to maintain the data center by itself. You have the responsibility to maintain the server, patching, maybe upgrading, upscaling. It all becomes your responsibility when it is on premise. But with Google, what are we doing? Or Gmail, what are we doing? It's a software. We're trying to use it, which is there on the cloud for enabling our email. We just have to care about the storage. You know, for a free service, I think they give you 5 GB space.
Right.
Yeah, all that happens only through the internet access. So we
Right.
just need to have internet access. We can leverage this service.
Correct. Sir, one point.
Sure.
It's configurable computing resources. Configurable. What is meaning of shared pool of configurable computing resources?
Yeah, here it is specific to infrastructure as service. You can configure the kind of server that you want. Maybe you say you want to be specific with the operating system. If you look at how Microsoft or other cloud providers provide, they have different flavors, say bronze, silver, and platinum. The bronze will say, I will give you only a storage of 1 TB. But when you go to silver, I will give you a storage of 2 TB. Maybe you will be able to customize yourself. That is your configuration. It will give you a drop down. You tell them, I need so much of storage, so much of memory. This is my requirement for my CPU as well. So it allows you to configure it. And you can probably even think about software as a service. It will allow you to configure the number of users that you want. You see today the capacity that you want is 100 users. Maybe you made a recruitment for all of a sudden about 50 people within a short time. You just go to this portal, increase the capacity to 50. You're leveraging it. So you just pay for what you use. You will have a billing cycle which happens if you're taking cloud service. Sometimes the bills are really a big shock. And then they realize that they were not really utilizing what they paid upfront. So they then go configure and bring down the usage level, maybe the network bandwidth, or it could be the memory that they allocated or the CPU. Because for each component, the cloud consumer has to pay for it.
Right, sir. Point clear, sir. Thank you. Sir, is it possible to take a break of 5 minutes, sir, for the washroom, something like that, if in between?
Yeah, if you want, we can just take a break for 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay? Fine.
Sure, sure.
Thank you.
Hadia, you seem to be very quiet today.
Yeah, because Tosti was doing the talking.
You have any questions up to this
No,
point?
no, thank you. It's clear. It's fine. Thanks.
Okay.
Also, sir, I noticed that the file shared by, I think, Mr. Sabit did not include everything that we went through yesterday for the Itil reference material.
Yes, I'm here. We can continue.
Okay. So we were discussing about the characteristics of cloud computing. Moving on, so how in the context of ITSM cloud computing can help? Cloud computing can change the service architecture and the distribution of the responsibilities between service consumers and service providers and their partners. So if you have certain aspects of service desk applications, you don't have to really invest in the products. Now you have certain most of the applications like ServiceNow or Remedy. These softwares are available in the cloud. You're still able to continue providing the service, but the cloud computing is helping you to leverage or enhance or enable the service or the value from that. So that way, cloud computing is actually having a big influence in the whole service management these days. So adoption of cloud computing model, you need to keep these things in mind. It replaces the infrastructure. As I told you, you don't have a data center to manage anymore. The complete hardware is actually provided by the service from the cloud itself. So the decrease or removes the number of infrastructure management expertise. Before you need to probably have a data center management or facilities management to ensure there is a proper cooling system happening in the data center. There is a site visit happening. You probably need to get certified if you have a data center as well. So all these factors are now removed. You don't probably need an infrastructure management expertise. You don't probably need a system engineer or system management manager itself. Imagine all that you need is a person who can help you to leverage these facilities from the cloud for you. You just have one person to manage the portfolio or the portal itself from Salesforce to get you all the required platforms and softwares. So that way removes or decreases the headcount as well. The shift actually focuses from service monitoring and control from the in-house infrastructure to the partner. So since you are no longer the accountable person or responsible for the service up and running, maybe the availability of it, the capacity of it, you just agree on what probably Microsoft Azure tells you that they will keep their server up and running for 99%. So you provide the same SLA to your customers. You are going to say that the service desk will probably be available 99% because you're making sure the staff is available, but the software or the technology that is required, you're going to leverage from the cloud. So the risk and the cost will still be there, but the risk is now handed over to the third party or the service partner. Changes of the cost structure of the service provider, removing specific capital expenditures and introducing new operating expenditures. So now that you have removed the human factor, you've reduced your size of the organization, and then in terms of hardware that you probably purchased, even that is reduced, and probably you had multiple partners and suppliers to maintain the infrastructure also. So even that is gone. Now you have a capital from these savings that you have made. That will help you to invest in new operating expenditures. Maybe you can come out with new products and service lines. So that way you're trying to utilize this cloud computing option. It introduced new security and compliance risk and requirements. Definitely, what control you had within the organization, you were very sure that the server was maintained by you. You had a different process in place for your security. But now that the data is residing in the cloud, you need to be extremely careful about the privacy or about the data security now. Now, how are you going to control that? The only way when it comes to um, maintenance is through your agreement that you're going to have, the terms and conditions that you lay out with your cloud service provider. There, you need to be extremely careful to tell them these are the things that you are going to comply with. For example, your organization who wants to comply with the European Union GDPR. So you will tell them that since I am supposed to be liable and compliant to this responsibility is with you. If you're working for FDA US and anything to deal with healthcare, it got its own regulations. Maybe it's to do with US regulation HIPAA, which is your health insurance. And if a process is being outsourced to India, in the agreement, they very clearly say that organization which takes up the project also has to comply with the HIPAA compliance. Same thing that you're going to do. If in case you have to do comply with GDPR, if you're going to give it to a service provider, you will tell them, since I have a requirement, you will have to make sure that you do it. And they have to probably do an audit and give you the report saying that they're compliant to GDPR. So that way you introduce new security, at the same time, you're transferring the risk, and you need to ensure this all happens in the agreement and the terms and conditions that you lay out before taking the service. And also it provides users with an opportunity to scale up their service consumption by using the service, self-service. Maybe you have a new service that you have and you put it on the cloud for people to avail it. Just by a self-service portal using the internet access, now you have many people accessing it because of the availability, because of the performance level, or it is that you have got a new market to uh, give it to. So there is a way that you can actually provide the service as well.
Can you please re-explain the last point, sir? Provide user with opportunity to scale service consumption using self-service by simple standard request.
Think of about any software that you have. Maybe a simple, say, mobile application itself. You come out with a new mobile application, but instead of having the data, everything on your premise, on your data center, you host it in the cloud. All that you've done is you put the software on the cloud, and now you have a huge number of people accessing this service. Same with the Microsoft 365, which is a cloud solution. What people were initially buying the license in terms of CDs, they were trying to install it, or maybe downloading the software itself from the website, and then calling the service center for the license key. Sometimes the license key doesn't work. They have to reissue the licenses. But now things have become so simple. You just log into a self-service portal. You say, this is the software that I want. I just want only Microsoft PowerPoint. You consume that and it is efficiently provided. And since it is on the internet, it is easy for anybody to access it. So what was very limited and what was very known to very less people, now you have many users utilizing this opportunity. And it helps you to scale up your service consumption as well, because you have more number of users. Are you clear on this?
Right.
So what are the kind of impact that it would have on the service providers' practices? Definitely, you need to think about the service level management, right? You have a service level agreement with the service provider, and then you need to tell them maybe agree to the conditions that they have. They say that the service that they provide is only for 95%. Will that help your organization and your business? You need to analyze that part. Definitely, you would get a reporting and measuring on how you're utilizing this service, how many number of people have logged into the portal, how many people have consumed the service from there. And maybe it is the reporting on the capacity of what servers that you have itself, or based on the reports, you maybe have to take decisions. Maybe you need to enhance your software itself, or you could probably expand your server. The other important point that we discussed already is the information security management. So you have a cloud security that you need to think about. So you have this messaging broker system, which is in between the consumer and the cloud service provider, which is almost like your access management. So this actually tells you who can have access to the cloud. So you're bringing that extra layer of information security there. Or, as I told you, in your agreements, you can lay down your information security requirements. You can tell them that your data that is stored has to be encrypted. Only that few people, what are the kind of access you have? You can define different kinds of roles to access the same information. Not everybody can see all the information that they want to. Some of them are confidential, which are there on the cloud. So you will allow only a certain role to access that information. So you need to think about the information security and also the continuity of service. What would happen if there is a disaster? Or what happens when the server crashes there? What happens if there's any factor which causes discontinuity of the service that you have provided in the cloud? So do they have a backup? Is there a proper disaster recovery system? Is the organization capable enough to handle all this? What if they just send you an email saying that we're extremely sorry that due to certain fire accident, our data center was collapsed and all the data were lost? But do you have addressed this in your service agreement? So you need to think from that perspective as well. And also your supplier management. Maybe you have a direct in relationship with any providers or suppliers. You're hosting it in the cloud, but are the suppliers using the service from there? Or how are they impacted now that you have moved your component to the cloud? Is there any impact when it comes to supplier management? Also, you need to think about the incident management. Definitely, there will be any kind of events that can actually cause error or some kind of disruption to the service. How are you going to handle it? Is there a proper SLA for the incident to be closed? You have defined what is low incident or medium and high level severity incidents. So if it is you raise a high severity incident, are they able to close it in 4 hours? Again, your reporting and measurement will tell you how many number of incidents was raised. So you raise a ticket with Microsoft, you tell them it is a high severity. Did they get back to you immediately and resolve the issue for you? And problems that occur many a times. The incident happened, you closed it, probably it happened after 2 days, the same kind. Then you create a problem ticket to see why the same incident has been occurring. You do a root cause analysis. You just create a problem ticket. They try to analyze the actual issue. Maybe that could lead to a change itself. Maybe they need to work on the software. They need to update their system. There was a patch required to close this. That could be a change or a new project by itself for the cloud hosting company. Definitely, you will have a service request management where on a daily basis, you will be raising tickets to ensure that you're in contact with the service desk of the service provider and you could resolve your issues. Service configuration management talks about the configuration of your configuration item itself. It could be any component. It could be your server, it could be your software. Do you have the option to configure them, or how you can actually do the configuration management as a whole? So it has an impact on all this because your asset management also depends on this configuration management. Maybe you need to have them added as your assets. You are doing a scan on these servers to understand any vulnerabilities are probably there. Maybe you're doing an audit on these servers. So though it is in the cloud, you still consider that to be an asset. So we have completed the two dimensions. First one was the organization and people, then the information and technology. And in information technology, we saw one of the most important component being the cloud computing, how it enables and helps ITSM as well. And the third one is your partners and suppliers. As we saw earlier, partners are your third parties who provide goods and services. Suppliers are your stakeholders who are responsible for providing services used. So every organization and every service depends to some extent on services provided by the organization. So we are interdependent. To provide a service, maybe we are dependent on other organization as well. The dimension encompasses of an organization's relationship with the organization that is involved from the start, which is the design, the development, deployment, and actual delivery. And once you deliver it, it is important that you are in continuous improvement of a service. So do not think at partners and suppliers only as an end of the product and only for maintaining the product. Most of the organizations, when they implement any technology or application to their environment, they consider partners and suppliers only to maintain their product, or maybe to just for renewal of their support contract for their any kind of support they might need for upgrades and others. But it is from the design stage you need to get involved with them. And there should be a proper relationship between the organization and the partners or suppliers. The most important thing is the contracts and other agreements that you have between the organization and the partners, because that is the document which actually lays out what kind of relationship you're going to have, at what level, what is the scope of it, what is the role of the organization, and what is the partner's role in it. As we saw earlier, you need to put the partners in such a place that they also are contributing to achieve the value of the product itself. In the fourth dimension, as we saw, do not look at partners as a silo or just the people who are enabling it, but they are also a key element in ensuring they provide the value of the product or the service that you're offering. So imagine any service that you have where you're dependent on the supplier. Maybe if it could be your ERP solution itself, where you have leveraged it to your internal employees without working with the supplier or the actual product who actually supplied it. After a later stage, if there is any kind of upgrade, if there is any improvements that are required, if there's any changes that are required based on the feedback that you collected, if you don't have a proper relationship with the supplier, you're not going to see the value out of that application or the service that you're providing. We all know that most of the iPhones that we have that are actually packaged from China, they design and even produce from there. There is a huge supply chain in between, the US California headquarters and what is happening in China. And there's a lot of partners and suppliers. Imagine if they all don't have a shared value for the product. Do we can even imagine how these products are all in such a consistent manner? We also saw that because of this pandemic situation, when the supply chain was cut, there was a big reduction on how these phones were produced. So we clearly understand the role of partners and suppliers. They actually help organizations to realize the value of the services that they provide. One method an organization may use to address the partners and suppliers is the service integration and management. So the key word here is service integration. So they become a part of the service itself. Don't look at them as a silo. At every stage of the service that we talked about, from the design stage to the delivery and the continual service improvement, they become a part of every stage. You involve them at every stage to take the feedback and see how they are actually helping the service. So this involves a use of specifically established integrators to ensure the service relationships are properly coordinated. So the integrator can be a business development manager, or you have a relationship manager between the organization and the supplier, who on constant basis communicated effectively to the supplier on the needs, on their roles and responsibilities, on probably auditing them and understanding whether they're complying to your requirements, or ensuring that the terms and conditions laid out in the agreement are keenly followed by the suppliers. So these become a very important integrator, and they can have multiple channels as well. Maybe they are in touch with your service desk, even in terms of getting the right information. That could be a door for them to integrate with your organization as well. Or it could be directly with your product managers or system managers. I know many organizations where the suppliers are talking directly to the concerned manager. They talk specific to facilities manager, they talk directly to the data center manager, they talk directly to the service desk manager, because they know what the application can do for them. They understand the product very well. So this way, those managers also become a key integrators to the organization as a whole. The service integration and management may be kept within the organization, but can also be delegated to a trusted partner. So you can actually transfer it to another partner as well, so that they can enable the service integration. You can probably outsource it so that they take care of the complete vendor management or supplier management. Big organizations actually do this because it's too complex and they have multiple suppliers and vendors. So they bring everybody into a particular room and they tell them that these are our suppliers and vendors, and we would like to partner with you too, so that you can take care of it and help us realize our values and product services.
I've got one question over here. Now,
Yep,
when service integration, as far I can understand from this term, is incorporating the supplier services provided by the suppliers in our service and final delivery to the customer, right?
that's right. Yes,
Yeah. So now, when we are planning to outsource, complete integration services, so there is a possibility, there is a risk factor in it, right?
definitely. As you rightly said, if you're trying to give away to a trusted, but the word is the trusted here.
Trusted. Sorry, I missed. Yeah, trusted partner, but trusted up to what extent this may introduce a risk? So it's okay. It works in certain economies, like certain countries. Like we have seen, they are mostly the here companies here. They have a trusted partners. They have a very robust selection approval methods. So that
True,
way we
true.
can say we can completely outsource the service integration, but not
That is right.
every supplier. So it will be very difficult. Tomorrow, customer can directly reach the partner, or partner can directly reach the customer if we don't have a proper control.
Very true, very true. See, definitely, even though when I tell you that you can move to your cloud and then your risk is kind of reduced in terms of managing the infrastructure, still there is a big risk factor involved in terms of data privacy, and business continuity. You
Right.
really don't know whether what they're doing with your data actually. And what would happen, imagine you go to a very low profile company who's probably a service provider, and due to some reason if they close the organization itself, what happens to all this? And once you go to cloud, it is so difficult from moving from one cloud provider to another cloud provider. We
Yes.
need to really think about that part. And once
Correct.
your data goes there, it looks like you're always connected to one person, right? You're always taking service from one person.
Mhm.
So there is a big risk and this big picture behind it.
Right. So there is a factor of risk, in fact, and that's a big
Yes.
factor. You rightly said. Correct.
So, true. See, by example, if in case I have an exchange infrastructure for my email system at my service, tomorrow, if I think that it is not really effective and I see there's a new technology coming, I can always move on to the next updated and the latest technology. But imagine I've taken a service from Microsoft on Outlook 365, and I'm mostly likely to use only Microsoft related products. If it
Correct.
is a third party, it's going to be really difficult for me to move on.
So this brings us to the due diligence then. Due diligence.
That's right.
And then secondly, as to how we define our contractual requirement, including the non-disclosure agreement.
That's right. So as I mentioned, when you're moving to cloud, one of the most important aspect will be your contract and agreements.
Right.
So you need to make sure and you need to work with your legal team and you need to think about all the other factors that I mentioned as well before taking that step. What would happen if I even want to think to move from Microsoft to Amazon? No way these are connected. There are two different entities by itself.
Mhm.
What would happen to the data?
Right.
So think about all this and then you actually take that step.
Right.
Yeah, as you rightly said, it is about the trust. There is a big part where even Google takes the certain services from Microsoft for certain services. They
Mhm.
have, even though they're big entities, they are working together at certain levels.
Mhm. Right.
So they consider them to be partners as well in certain aspects.
Correct.
Let's see a quick outputs and inputs here and definitely see some examples in terms of how the different types of organizations are there and the kind of services and outputs that they provide. The relationship between organizations may involve various levels of integration and formality. This is one form of cooperation, which is your goods supply. So if you're doing a kind of service which is related to goods, so your output is your goods that you're supplying. And the responsible for the person is actually the supplier. Once it is actually given to the customer, the responsibility of the outcome it lies with the customer itself. What kind of level of formality that you can maintain? What are the different kinds of agreement that they come into? It could be your supply contracts and your invoices. So that transaction or the documents ensures that the person has asked for a certain goods, it has been supplied, and the receipt of invoice clearly says the good has been supplied. It could be any of your components that you can think of, your computer, your phones, all these. And when you're taking a service delivery, here it could be anything. Imagine you want to take and avail a service from the cloud, which is your over 365. So we have a service provider, cloud service provider. And again, the person who's responsible for it when it comes for the outcome is the customer. Here, as I mentioned to you, the most important thing will be your contracts and the agreements. These are the most important documents that you need to think about when availing a service. An example would be your cloud computing, which is your infrastructure as a service or a software as a service as well. The last is the service partnership, where you are sharing the outputs and the outcomes as well. It's a value shared or the co-creation that we talked about. Example, it could be your internal teams. When it comes to onboarding an employee in your organization, the team has to work with the IT for ensuring that person gets his laptop in time. Maybe he needs a desk. Maybe the facility team has to provide him a proper workspace to work with, and maybe the stationery that he needs, all that are provided. Then the HR team will probably work with the finance team to ensure that this person is enrolled to receive a salary on time. But the outcome of onboarding by itself is a shared between different departments, and it is being provided by different internal teams that we see here. You will have a different kind of goals or measurement criteria. It will be your, not your SLA, but it will be your OLA, which is your organization level agreement. So which agreement you have between teams. You say that I create a ticket for onboarding. The HR has to close the ticket within 1 day. Facilities has got 2 days to clear up all the things that are required. Maybe IT team has to create an email account for the person or provide him the laptop at the same time. So all these have to be completed in 1 day. You have an organization level agreement between the teams, and the actual outcome will has to be shared. So it cannot be primary responsible of HR team only. They cannot take the credit for doing this. So let's look into the factors that probably could influence organization strategy when it comes to for suppliers. You need to think about the strategy, focus on it, because your strategy is what is going to drive whether your strategy will define, should I move to the cloud or not? Example, if it is a government organization, many government organizations will be reluctant to move to the cloud because of data security or the strategy that they have that the government data or the citizen data should stay within the same country itself, because the cloud infrastructure can be hosted in US, and those US laws will be applicable to the data privacy. Maybe you will not be able to enforce any regulations because the data is outside the country. Another aspect is your corporate culture. What kind of culture you have within your employees? How is it being cascaded from the higher management to the low level? Is there a proper transparency between the departments? Is there a proper communication and collaboration that happens? So those things factors as well. Resource scarcity. This is an important aspect as well. It could be your employees or it could be your infrastructure scarcity as well. So if you have able to leverage enough resources, enough talents to get your work done, you have the right people and right skill set, this actually plays an important role when it comes to the partners and suppliers. Also the cost. You may not be able to bear the cost when it comes to the maintenance of a product. The support level agreement that you sign on could be a huge burden to have to continue the service itself. So your budgeting becomes very important. So you take the service, avail it from the partners to do it, but then you need to think about the cost that comes as well. Most important is your subject matter expertise. It could be either the talent that is there within the partners. Are they really aware about what they're doing? Are they really an expert in their profession? Or do we have the right skills and subject matters within the organization as well? We need to think about the stakeholders between your organization and the partners. Are these people talented enough to deliver the actual value? There are definitely the external constraints that we can talk about, the external factors that we already saw. And this can also be your demand patterns, which can come from your opportunities and demands. Is it really important for me to avail or to use the service? Is it important for me to roll out the service? So your demand and opportunity will decide that. So we are in the last,
Sir, can you please go back to the previous slide?
yeah,
I've got one question, sir. It's okay, demand pattern okay. Now, one point which, in fact, it was not part of the slides also, but I have got one question here. So,
yeah,
partner selection, where to start? Now, as you know, in the IT or this ITSM scope of work of businesses, you see standardized services and customized services also, right?
yes.
Now, shall we, now it is back to back, it comes from the opportunity only, or we have a standard mindset, a standard product, and start selecting the supplier first. Like there are two types of supplier. One is the standard supplier, like principal, for example, Google, Adobe, Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, there can be lower level supplier, lower category.
Mhm.
So these suppliers are standard. They have a well-defined service agreements or agreement contracts which to be done. So first, we need to, when we are working on a standard product, we need to finalize a contract with them, or it is to be driven by the customer requirement first. Selection, I'm talking about selection and approval. So what could be the criteria? We will directly go and select the supplier, or it will come from the service that we are planning to offer to come up.
See, your partner selection or supplier selection by itself will have a process in place, right?
Right.
And as I told you, when you're selecting the supplier or pattern, these could be one of the factors as well. Know the strategy, the corporate culture, because imagine there's a corporate culture where organizations are really having a good budget to go with big giants. And
Right.
because if you look at the Gartner, the leader, the quadrants, there are organizations which look at the leaders quadrant only and select their partners and products from there.
Right.
But if the corporate culture is such that they would like to engage with other quadrants players, or the niche players or the innovators,
Right.
maybe their product value is more or less, as we saw, the cost is one of the concerns,
Right.
and they can go to them and select it. But
Right.
definitely, they will have a proper supplier selection methodology. There will be a proper process involved. There will be a team who does these criteria. Before I have the service to be fulfilled, I need these things from the supplier. They try to evaluate that and see who can fill this bill. I then roll out, maybe an RFP or RFC proposals to see who's there in the market who can provide this. There will be a
So,
pattern to select the supplier itself.
right. So it is more of a situation specific. Like one customer service will be requiring a standard supplier or a well-reputed one. The other customer service for the service delivery for other customer, maybe other quadrant will work, right? That way.
That is right. That is right. Because it all depends on multiple factors. See, because people go to big giants because they've been in the market for years.
Right.
And you know that you can get the service for next 15 to 20 years
Right.
because the technology life itself, if you see every 5 to 10 years, the technology changes. People move on to the new one. But at least can they sustain for the next 5 years?
Right.
Do you think they can provide you the enough support that is required for the next 5 years? They also look into the stability of the partners, right? Do they have enough money or share? How is their shares doing? Are they
Right.
really stable in the market? What if you purchase a product and the company closes within a month or two?
Right.
So your investment is totally a waste, right? You probably paid 1 million dirhams for an ERP solution,
Right.
and you don't see the actual value because the company is not doing well.
Right.
And you see major products from other big giants. You'll have a product upgrade from time to time. And once you purchase that, you're continuously changing your product because the actual supplier is giving you that. So, do you think the small players can do that kind of a release on a time to time, involving the customers and addressing their needs?
Right. I
All
think point
these actually, yeah,
it's basically a situation specific and what the customer needs, a strategy of the company. So many.
exactly. It's all to do with the organization strategy. Yes.
Sorry. Yes. Point is clear. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So the last dimension that we are is the value stream.
Can
Would you
we
like
take
to
a
take a
break?
break?
Yeah, can we take a break and come back?
Yeah, the time is 12:35 here. So can we take a break for 15 minutes?
Sounds good.